Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. I am so glad so many of you are joining me in March and over the next couple of months to read Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. This past week, I read the first book, or volume, that is the first larger subsection of around 100 pages or so. Different translations call the subsections by different names. Anyway, today I want to talk just a bit about how the section is structured, what I think it accomplishes, and the parts I enjoyed most. I'd love to hear how your own reading is going, and if you have any insights of your own to add. Please chime in down in the comments. War and Peace opens in 1905, when Napoleon's conquests in Europe are starting to raise fears in Russia. As I see it, Book 1 has three major sections. The first takes place in Petersburg, the second in Moscow, and the third in a more rural area. The first section introduces us to the main characters and the families that will be central throughout the book. And we also get a picture of these three different areas of Russia. In Tolstoy's writing, Petersburg is a sparkling city with a bustling social scene for elites, highly influenced by European culture, including wealthy Russians who predominantly spoke French to each other. And that is where we readers first enter. Anna Pavlovna is hosting a grand party where many of the book's protagonists talk with each other. In a way, we too, as readers, are invited to this event, getting to meet people with just about the same degree of depth we might meet people at a pre-COVID celebration. We observe who was beautiful and who was tall. We hear snatches of their conversations. And we notice big personalities that stand out for one reason or another. My personal favorite character in this first scene is Pierre, a somewhat awkward young man who my translation says doesn't know how to conduct himself at this fancy party. Others translate that as he doesn't know how to behave, or even that he doesn't know how to live. He's a bit awkward, but in a lot of ways, he's sort of a stand-in for the reader. We too are invited into this elaborate event and don't quite know what to make of it, just like Pierre. Perhaps that's one of the reasons it seems so many readers choose him as a favorite character in these early pages. Incidentally, Pierre leaves Anna Pavlovna's party to go to a far less staid celebration, also in Petersburg, sort of a frat party where young men are drinking heavily and pulling ridiculous pranks, including tying a policeman back to back with a bear. And Pierre is just about as out of place here as he was at the fete. Okay, in the second section of Book 1, we travel to Moscow, a much less sophisticated city than the stylish and aristocratic Petersburg, and interestingly, it's far more Russian rather than European. I suspect we will get a more in-depth contrast between the two cities as War and Peace goes on. Here we go to a few more parties, the name day celebration for the mother and daughter at the Rostovs, and then a full dinner party there that evening. Here we meet a very different kind of household, still elite, but the Rostovs seem to be a family full of laughter. And not surprisingly, there is grief as well, about an elderly man whose death shifts the financial position of characters, but also a more subtle hint that death is at the heart of even the young family. The young mother of the household has lost 8 of her 12 children. One of the children still alive is Natasha, a preteen girl who just sparkles off the page. And then finally, in the third section of Book 1, we go to the more rural estate of the Volokhanskys, an estate called Bald Hills in my translation, but I think it might be called Bleak House in a different version. Surely not, but then again, it would be fairly appropriate. There we meet the strict and humorless father, the obedient but sad daughter, and the son Andrei bickering with his pregnant wife. Actually, we meet Andrei and his wife at the party in Petersburg first, There are other links between the sections. Pierre's not only at the Petersburg parties, but at the name day celebrations in Moscow. And another one of the characters attending one of the parties writes a letter to the daughter at the Volokhonsky house. At least among these elites, there does not seem to be much sense of isolation or separation between the geographical locations. I have a couple of things I want to raise and see what you all think. First, I find it fascinating to watch these Russian characters talk extensively in French about their feelings about French aggression. Perhaps this is an overstatement, but in general it seems that older characters are more rabidly anti-Napoleon, often explicitly because of fear that he would destroy the elite class. Many of the younger characters admire Napoleon. But still, so many of them are quick to say they're going to join the military action against him. Perhaps this is because joining the military is what's expected of them. Or perhaps it's because no matter how much they admire Napoleon, their sense of Russian nationalism and Russian identity will determine their behavior. I love the fact that Tolstoy shows us a range of attitudes here. But I'm still fascinated that the characters could be having their disagreements and tensions in French. Actually, one of my favorite scenes is when two footmen are observing elites speaking French. Tolstoy writes that they were acting as if they understood what was being said, but didn't want to show it. I'm not exactly sure how one acts that way, but it made me laugh. There's a lot of that kind of snarky humor here. Another example is how all the guests at Anna Pavlovna's party had to go over to greet the random old aunt sitting in the corner. I can imagine couples glancing at each other with a smile and a little shrug, but they know that this is just what is going to be done here. When I was chatting with David about this particular scene, he mentioned that it made him think almost of some of the scenes in Jane Austen. Interesting. A very different kind of scene that I also loved was the interaction between Andrei and his sister Maria at the end of the rural section. He's about to leave for war, and she gives him a necklace to wear into battle. He's an atheist, and she's a devoutly religious person. The necklace she gives him is a religious icon. He agrees to wear it, perhaps because he knows it's a family piece, or because he knows it will mean a lot to his sister. It's quite a powerful scene, but a bit ambiguous as well. Is she being sanctimonious? Maybe. But she asks her brother to wear the icon for her, not for him. There is tension in this scene, even though there is also clearly love. Maybe you can really see how their strict father shaped both of his children in ways that are negative, but also in ways that are potentially good. Finally, I wanted to mention that there is what seems to me to be a lot of foreshadowing in this chapter. Perhaps because this novel is Russian, I immediately started thinking about Chekhov's gun, that idea that everything that appears in a great work of art is there for a reason. If an author calls our attention to a rifle above the mantel, by the end of the text, we'll hear it go off. So here, and I will try to be subtle, Tolstoy makes us consider a health situation of a relatively young person. And I'm assuming that will be a storyline we see again very soon. Another example. We see a young person express love towards someone, and then see the person consorting with someone else, who might be seen as an unlikely partner. I'm assuming that link will come to fruition. Do you see anything else? Well, that will do it for this video. I would love to hear how your reading experiences have gone and what you've been thinking about. Next week, we'll chat about Book 2. Thanks for joining me here today on Hannah's Books. See you soon.